we'll be talking about partisan politics, public safety, and then 5 key elections this year that we're highlighting that incorporate both of those concepts in them. So the first thing we're going to talk about is partisanship. So although many local governments officially hold nonpartisan elections, most mayors across America's 100 largest cities are affiliated with one of the 2 major political parties. In recent election cycles, Republicans have won control of the US Congress and 2/3 of all state legislatures. Nevertheless, 67 mayors in America's largest 100 cities were affiliated with the Democratic Party at the start of 2016, and Democrats are believed to have considerable organizational and demographic advantages in America's largest cities. In 2016, 25 of the 100 mayorships are up for election in these cities. And we focused on 3 mayoral elections based on a number of factors, including major party opposition and the area's presidential voting history. The first race we want to talk about is San Diego. So here, Republican Mayor Kevin Faulconer is the only Republican mayor of a top 10 city. He was up for re-election this year, but he defeated 2 Democratic challengers in the June primary outright, so he won't go up for election in November. San Diego County voted for Obama both times and Bush both times before that, and then he was actually elected in a special election to replace Bob Filner, who resigned in 2013. In Corpus Christi, Mayor Nelda Martinez faces a Republican challenger in her general election. It's interesting that she's a Democratic mayor in the city because the county that Corpus Christi resides in voted for Republican presidents all the way back to 2000. And their congressional district has been Republican since the Republican wave election in 2010. So she's kind of an outlier in terms of being a Democratic elected official in a very Republican county. And the third mayoral race with partisan implications is in Stockton, where Mayor Anthony Silva, a Republican, faces a Democratic challenger. The Democratic challenger beat him by 7 points in the primary election, but didn't beat him by enough to prevent a general election. The county that Stockton is in has voted for Obama both times and Bush both times. And Stockton is the only remaining Bay Area city with a Republican mayor. So next we'll move on to public safety. And this is something that's kind of come to the forefront in the 4 years since Trayvon Martin's death in 2012. There's been a number of high-profile incidents that have made national media involving police and the public, and it sparked a lot of protests and conversations in the government sector about public safety and responsibilities of police officers. So public opinion, there was a poll conducted just recently by St. Leo University out of Florida. It showed that 60% of the public says that they strongly trust police officers and police departments. And that falls in line with a lot of other public opinion polling about various government services. But only 45% trust the judicial system or for juries to do the right thing. And State Senator Holly Mitchell of California told Mother Jones that the refusal to indict, as occurred in Ferguson and other communities of color, has fostered an atmosphere of suspicion that threatens to compromise our justice system. So you can see that while people might still trust police, they don't necessarily trust the judicial system to translate what the police are doing into good results. There have been some public safety measures on the ballot this year. In San Francisco, voters approved Proposition D in June by about 80 to 20, and it will require the San Francisco Office of Citizen Complaints to investigate any police-related shooting, whereas in the past 5 years, that office has only investigated about 1 in every 4 shootings. And then an initiative that didn't make the ballot this year in California, but could make it in 2018, would essentially allow courts to designate jurisdictions as over-policed, and then those jurisdictions would require additional oversight and auditing. 2 of the cities where these high-profile national media attention-garnering incidents have taken place are actually having mayoral elections this year. So the first one is Baltimore, where Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Blake is not running for re-election. Obviously, in Baltimore, the death of Freddie Gray in April 2015 brought a lot of protest and actually resulted in curfews and the governor declaring a state of emergency. In this race, we saw a Black Lives Matter activist running for mayor in the primary, but he was unsuccessful. And State Senator Catherine Pugh won a 13-person primary, and she's expected to win in the general election handily. The other city where such an incident occurred was Baton Rouge, where the mayor is also not running for re-election, although he's running for Congress. The fatal police shooting of Alton Sterling and then the subsequent murder of 3 police officers there occurred in July of this year. Most of the mayoral debate here is centered around the use of body cameras and whether or not they function, because there's some question as to whether or not the body cameras function properly in that incident. And here the police union has actually endorsed in the race, and they've endorsed a Republican councilman for mayor. So those are the races that we're watching and the themes that we're following throughout this election. Does anyone have any questions?
I'm curious if you're seeing any kind of, in terms of like partisanship, because you were following elections back in 2014, and you've seen like other, like odd year elections too. And I'm curious if there are any other trends that you've noticed that are happening this year that we haven't seen in previous years.
I think that this is the first year, because we've looked at elections previously, but this is the first year where we really have enough background information maybe to spot trends. I think we still see the same trend of, in some cities, there's very little competition for elected positions, where it's just incumbents running for re-election unopposed year after year. In some cities in Texas, they've even canceled elections because no one's filing to run in them beyond the incumbent. But I think in terms of other broad trends, there's nothing I can think of off the top of my head.
I'm so curious about that idea of them canceling elections. Is that, I assume it's something that they're legally allowed to do if there's no incumbent, or if there's no one running against the incumbent?
Yeah, because essentially if the city can go, okay, we have three races up, 3 seats up for election in this odd election day that might only be a city election, and they could just outright cancel the election, it will save them just thousands of dollars, basically. But you really only see that in Texas primarily. I think in Florida, there's also been elections canceled just because there's no competition running, basically.
Oh, wow. That's so interesting. Thanks. I never heard of that happening. Great. Do we have any other questions? There's both a Q&A tool and then the chat that people can use to drop in any questions that they have. If there are no more questions, though, then we can go ahead and wrap up and let everyone get back to what they're doing today. We would like to thank you so much for joining us. If you do have other questions later, you can reach out to us through email at editor@ballotpedia.org. You can also tweet at us at Ballotpedia, or look us up on Facebook, facebook.com/Ballotpedia, and we'd be happy to answer your other questions. Next week, we will also have more webinars. On Tuesday, we'll be talking about election policy, and it should be really interesting. On Wednesday, we'll be talking about energy and environmental policy. And on Thursday, we will be talking about healthcare policy. And all of those will be at the same time as today's. So thank you all so much for joining us.